The story of Jove and Io picks up right after that of Daphne and Apollo. And of course, there is a little bit of a transition. The focus on the end of the Daphne and Apollo is on Daphne being transformed into a tree, and the focus of her being the very last lines in that, having branches that shake in assent to her new life. That being a tree, she is the daughter of the river god Peneus, and she has been transformed into a tree. These facts are sort of uh, lodged or conspicuous at the end of that section, and then the poem goes on and into the Jove and Io. We start off with there was a grove in Thessaly. So we are sort of on that note, moving on. A grove is a little cluster of trees, a mini forest, if you will. And then there's another reference to the river Peneus, which rises deep within the Pindus range. So suddenly we're getting another callback. So we're on familiar grounds. He's just taking a thread from the previous story and weaving it into a different narrative. So it's a continuum, but an evolution. So it is change even amid elements of consistency, which is the repeated pattern of this poem. And over the next few lines, we are given we dwell very slightly on Daphne and Daphne's father, and he and the other river gods get together, hanging out with the boys, so to speak, and we are told about how everybody feels a little awkward about how, well, gee, Peneus, I hear about your daughter. That's a shame. She's a tree. Okay, a little awkward there. But then we're introduced to another river god, Inachus. I'm going to assume that's how you pronounce the name. I really don't know. The only river absent, concealed in the recesses of the cave, he added to his volume with the tears he grimly wept for his lost daughter, Io. So we have another lost daughter, another bereaved father, another bereaved river god father. So there are all of these little parallels coming up that, again, show constancy within constant change. Those two dynamics are always present in Ovid. And we are told about how the Inachus is uncertain about the fate of his daughter. She just disappeared one day, and we are told in a little bit of a time jump. For Jupiter had seen the girl wandering from her father's banks and had accosted her, and it's a parallel exactly of Apollo and Daphne. A somewhat amorous god sees a young human girl and gets the itch and pursues her. And the line itself is particularly telling, I always find. O maiden worthy of almighty Jove and destined to delight some lucky fellow, I know not whom, upon your wedding night, come find some shade, he said, in these deep woods, showing her where the woods were very shady, while the sun blazes high above the earth, which is a very cheesy line for the father of the gods. If you are a damn near omnipotent being, why are you sounding like some, divorced middle-aged car salesman trying to pick up a girl 20 years younger in a bar? It just seems seedy. Come on, let's find some shade. Oh, it's a little dark over there. Let's go over there. It's cheesy, but that's part of the point. The majesty, the enormity, the authority of the gods that we see so much in the examples that we get from Virgil, most conspicuously. These are very different characterizations of the gods. Here, they are just a bunch of, like, horny half-wits, just following their lusts. There is no sense of Poseidon rising up and quelling a giant storm at sea just by his magisterial presence. There is not that. Here we have Jove, or Zeus, also known as Jupiter, just getting a little bit of a, hey, I'm gonna hit that, and it's so human. It brings the scale of the gods down to size. So if Virgil was using the gods as a kind of emblematic authority and in essence a stand-in for governmental and imperial authority, here we're shown that, well, okay, even those figures are driven by the same human characteristics. If humans can want to be like them, here we have gods who seem to want to be like humans, and they're just going around like, as if there are no consequences. This is a very pre-Me Too world that they're in. And so he goes and he pursues this girl, Io, and again you have that familiar dynamic of the horny god pursuing the young girl, and it's a chase scene just like we saw in there. So there are all these little callbacks that suggest, oh, okay, this is just like that back there. It's slightly different because everything has to be, but it's also slightly the same because the difference marks a continuity itself. The funny part, the really funny part, comes in when Juno gets in on the picture, and she starts to realize that, well, okay, Jove had brought down some fog to kind of mask what he was up to in raping this girl, but the fog tipped off Juno, Hera, who sees, hey, why is it foggy? I didn't see anything about fog in my weather forecast. Something's going on. She realized that neither falling mist nor rising fog could be the cause of this phenomenon, and looked about at once to find her husband, as one too well aware of the connivings of a mate so often taken in the act. Oh, that guy again. What's he up to? And here, the fury and the deviousness and the power, again in the Virgilian conception, is somewhat the air is let out of that tire a little bit, and she becomes more of what was kind of in the Virgilian conception, but much more so here. She's really just a suspicious housewife. Oh, he's off. He's doing that again. She keeps catching him in the act. And not to make light of marital infidelity, but that's what we're dealing with here. But on a godly realm, it becomes absurd. It becomes ridiculous. And it, again, sucks the authority out of these figures. You can't take them seriously if they're just acting like every old married couple who have, had some problems. And, the husband never really grew up, and he's always off, seeking dalliances. And the wife is just sick of it and fed up with it, but she's still, just part of it, and she's intent on just exacting petty little punishments along the way because she can't really do anything about it. And so, okay, she gets in on the act, and she comes in and doesn't get in on the act. She comes into the scene and starts hunting around, and Jove saying, uh-oh, the wife's here. So he transforms Io into a cow, into a gleaming heifer, a beauty still, a beautiful cow. I'm not sure if that's quite satirical. I tend to think it is, but to each his own. If you really got it for cows, good for you. And Jove sees, oh, nice cow. Where's it from? I've never seen it before. That's a good looking cow. Very suspiciously, and Jove, being a very typical husband idiot at this point, tells a completely believable lie, saying, replying that the cow was born out of the earth. Yeah, because you want to make your story as hard to believe as possible. uh, but Juno says, "Okay, fine. I'm going to play along. I'll go along with that. Just to get you. Feigning ignorance, as the as Ovid says, which is again just more petty marital strife of a couple who maybe arguably should get divorced at this point, but this is all so petty, and they are in fact playing with some consequences for the human beings, because Io is now a cow, and we know from context already that her father has no idea about this and misses her terribly. She just disappeared one day. Well, what happened? But for the divines, for Jove and Juno, there are no consequences really. The consequence for Jove is that, well, the wife is going to give me a hard. Okay, she caught me again. She's going to give me a hard time. I'm going to listen. Yeah, I don't want to do that. Which is the way their relationship has tended to be through multiple epics at this point. But the triviality of it and the selfishness of it have really never been so acute. The Jove goes along with it and says, okay, yeah, this is a cow, and he at Juno's request, he gives it to her, saying, "Yeah, sure, there you go." And Juno sets up a guard over her, a special guard who is Argus. Um, Argus, the name of Odysseus's dog, who keeps watch for him. Here you have Argus is a creature with 100 eyes, and the eyes all take turns sleeping, so that at any one time there are always plenty of eyes to stay awake and watch over what it is. It's a very effective little night watchman, guard, because you're never going to sleep, or at least the eyes individually sleep. Interesting little characterization, by the way. But Jove feels bad. Jove feels bad about this. Io is under constant watch. He cannot go and take the curse off or anything like that, or take the spell, or whatever you want to call it. And and so Io stays a cow and goes about her business, as a cow, and is awkward in front of she goes around her old family, and they don't recognize her until she comes up with when she tries, like, expressing affection and stuff, but that doesn't really drive home. But what she does do is very interesting. If words could just have come, she would have spoken, telling them who she was, how this had happened, and begging their assistance in her case. But with her hoof, she drew lines in the dust, and letters of the words she could not speak told the sad story of her transformation. She took her hoof in the dirt and carved out a message. She wrote. But significantly, look at the way that is described. It is very incremental, just like the change that we saw in Daphne in the previous episode. this is laid out in very segmented elements of information that chart change incrementally. Um, uh, but with her hoof, she drew lines in the dust. Doesn't say immediately she wrote her name or wrote hello or anything like that. She drew lines in the dust. And of course, if you were watching that, that's how it would start. And in fact, as anybody who sits down to write anything, that's how it begins. You put your pen on the piece of paper and you draw a line. And then maybe you draw another line, you draw a couple more. And over time, they start to take the shape of letters and letters of the words she could not speak. So it starts with lines, it goes to letters, and only over time can you see that the import, the message gets through in terms of language. So it is about change. It is about increments of change. One thing starts as a line. The next development is it manifests itself as a letter. The letters become words. The words become sentences, and so on and so on. Now, significantly, again, whenever a poet brings up writing in any sense, whenever a poet references books or writing or literature or speech, it is conspicuous because they are writing about their own medium, and often they're commenting on it. So here you have Ovid suggesting a new way of looking at literature, perhaps, with less a sense of where it's going and more of a sense of the immediacy of it. With, again, the contrast with Virgil. With Virgil, it was all about the end product. Aeneas will found Rome. Here, Ovid is circling back and saying, no, 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 no. That's way off in the future. You can't really count on that. You don't know what that is just yet. Here, the experience is about one little element. That's all you know. And then the next element comes along, and you can start to circle back and make connections to that. But it all begins with that first instant of recognition, that first creation of meaning that you knit into a previous fabric, but you're not sure where it's going just yet. So it's a curious little aesthetic war that he's having with the Virgilian example. Jove feels bad, and he sends Mercury down to help out. And Mercury goes and strikes up a conversation with Argus by playing a kind of a pipe or flute, or it's a series of pipes that make different sounds. So that is, again, another example. It's a small pipe where there are actually a multitude of pipes, maybe half a dozen or so, of different lengths that are stuck together, and then you play kind of like an ancient harmonica. But again, you see the individual sounds, the individual reeds are put together so that the meaning, the beauty, the art comes out of the totality, but through segmented elements within that. So it's all kind of tied together. But Argus is a big fan of the pipe. Mercury knows this, so he kind of disguises himself. He leaves his fancy hat and winged shoes behind, and goes and sort of, hey, yeah, what are you doing? And I'm just playing my pipe. And Argus almost a little bit lasciviously says, oh, really? I like that pipe. Why don't you bring it over here? Sit down and let's have a chat. I don't know. But they start talking, and they start talking about the pipe, and Hermes begins to relate another story to the creation of the pipe, to the significance of this reed pipe, talking about how it had come to be, an etiology, and in that he starts retelling another version of a Daphne story where a god gets horny and chases down a human girl to rape her. Which again is sort of another callback, another continuation to indicate change. It is also an example of an embedded narrative, uh, a um, a one narrative nested within the other within a broader frame tale, which many artists are going to be taking up over the time. We've seen certain elements of this. Technically, all of Odysseus's adventures, the apologoi, are an embedded narrative because he is in the act of telling those stories, as opposed to having the authorial poet voice, Homer, tell the stories. It is he gives the mic to Odysseus. So you get a story within a story. And just as you're starting to get into that one and forget about the fact that this is Mercury telling, or Hermes telling, well, it's Mercury and Greek, telling Argus this story, it breaks off. And he began to say, and then ... There remained to tell of how the maiden, having spurned his pleas, the gods, fled through the trackless wilds until she came to where the gently flowing Ladon, another river, stopped her in her flight, and she begged the water nymphs to change her shape. So again, an almost exact repetition of the Daphne story. By now the third iteration of this particular narrative, but it's almost having fun. Ovid is almost having fun with this, poking the reader a little and saying, and he began to say ... as if you're bringing the audience up, or the reader up, to the edge of a whole new narrative that they're going to get swept up in. But then he pulls back, and he pulls back out of the mimetic mode, so to speak, and starts narrating it a little bit more, and starts saying, well, okay, this is what happened. So it goes from dialogue to a summary of the action, which is an interesting little rhetorical move, because so much of this is about the way stories are being told. Ovid is clearly playing with some of the conventions of storytelling. By this point, the reader has probably given up on the idea of, well, all right, is this, are we going to get a single hero in this? And the answer, of course, is no. There is no single narrative. It is all constant change. And the only single identifiable characteristic of all the stories is change. The continuity and constancy of change, but change as a material and consistent phenomenon. That pipe of reeds, unequal to their lengths, and joined together one-on-one with wax, took the girl's name and bears it to this day. Another etiology about how the pipe came to be, but you can see again the pipes lashed together of different lengths. Each one is different, but together they make a kind of music, kind of art, which is what the entire Ovidian project is about. Now Mercury was ready to continue until he saw that Argus had succumbed, for all his eyes had been closed down by sleep. He silences himself and waves his wand above those languid orbs to fix the spell. Now just look at that, and how Ovid is quieting down the narrative. Now Mercury was ready to continue, and he's just sort of like, okay, potential for action, but in reserve right now, until he saw that Argus had succumbed. He had fallen asleep, for all his eyes had been closed down by sleep. So again, he's sort of repeating the same thing. Okay, he had succumbed, now his eyes had closed and down to sleep. He silences himself. Mercury is quieting himself. He's bringing down the temperature of the narrative, of the flow of poetry, and waves his wand. Those nice soft W's in this. Again, you can't really take word by word translations literally, or You can't lean too hard on a translation, but I think that waves his wand is meant to be very soothing and gentle above those languid orbs to fix the spell. And then, without delay, he grasps the nodding head, and where it joins the back of the neck, he severs it with his curved blade and flings it bleeding down the steep rock face, staining it with gore. Whoa! Change, contrast from one line to the other, from easy to wow! Violent, gruesome violence. And it is change. It is a shock. It is a dramatic shift in the tone. And here again, Ovid is poking the reader a little, having some fun with this, having some fun with that, saying, yeah, sure, I'm going to do this, but really, I'm going to do this. It is surprising. Of course, Io is eventually changed back because of Jove's persistence in this, and we get another great montage of images as she is changed. The goddess was now pacified, and Ovid at once began to regaining her lost looks till she became what she had been before. Her body lost all of its bristling hair, her horns shrank down, her eyes grew narrower, and her jaws contracted, arms and hands returned, and hooves divided themselves into nails. Nothing remained of her bovine nature, unless it was the whiteness of her body. She had some trouble getting her legs back, and for a time feared speaking lest she moo, and so quite timidly regained her speech. So again, you get those quick images of one characteristic changing, and then another characteristic changing, and in succession, they broadly become an evolution from cow to human, which we saw with the Daphne transformation. Here we're seeing again. This is clearly a significant mode, but it keeps with that concept, that aesthetic theory of evolution, individual elements of evolution frozen in time that together create constant change. Significantly, of course, we get one more little note about our comic couple, Jove and Juno, and the Io had found her way to Io had found her way to Egypt, where she was worshipped as a goddess, celebrating cows. You get another callback in there as she drank from the Nile, O Nile, another river, you let her rest from endless labor. Having reached your banks, she went down awkwardly upon her knees, and with her neck bent backward, raised her face, as only she could do it, to the stars, which is another callback to the earlier line about human beings being able to look up and animals only being able to look down. So always taking a previous thread and bringing it back, but it's just a little bit changed now. It's just a little bit different because the context is different, and now we're seeing it a little differently. And so constant change. Jove intercedes at that point, and he gets Juno to agree that we can change her back, and that's how we get the montage. But the comic line par excellence there is that she, in begging Juno to let up on the punishment, Jove says, "In future," he said, "put your fears aside. Never again will you have cause to worry about this one." And he swore upon the Styx being another river, of course. But about don't worry about this one. I'm not going to cheat on you with her anymore. I guess once he sees her as a cow, it's just like, well, the honeymoon's over, the romance is gone. It's a comic moment. It's another moment that casts the divine realm, the omnipotent gods, the master authority figures of the entire culture as just doofuses. And the element of it that really strikes is how recognizable they are, how human they are, because they are acting like an old married couple, even as he acts like a 14-year-old boy. And it's identifiable. It is arguably much more identifiable than the authorial, magisterial, Virgilian characterization of the gods, but it is not particularly pious. It's not particularly reverent. We're not inspired to respect these people or these figures. The audience is invited to laugh at them. You can see how that might be problematic for other authority figures in the Roman Empire. And that's a significant theme within this broad aesthetic project that he's doing. There are cultural and political contexts that are never far from the surface, and as he is poking fun at the reverence for gods and self-declared god figures like the emperor, Ovid is venturing into a troubling area for himself personally, and a but a really rich area for his poem aesthetically.